Welcome to the Wife of Violence podcast, where we dive deep into topics of personal growth, passion, and leadership, all with violence on our mind. I'm Amber, I'm the wife.
I'm Ryan, I am the violence.
And this morning we both woke up and chose violence.
Thankfully.
Thank goodness. Are you ready to get into it? Not the violence, the podcast about the violence. Both. Okay, sure. On this episode, we are striking hard and striking fast to combine passion and purpose into meaningful work. So, it's episode 2. Couldn't think of something any easier than just passion and purpose. Simple ideas. We'll knock it out real quick and go home.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, we are home, but that's besides the point. So anyway, as I was actually working on this intro, an ad came up and it started with, "We all have passions that drive us." Do you remember this ad? I was actually working and we were in the same room together, which is pretty rare. So I did take a quick glance to see if you clocked it, and I think you were head in your phone. So
I don't pay attention to ads very much.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have if I weren't passionate about passion at that moment.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was like, jackpot, great. I'm here. I'm all ears. Like, what is this company ad? What's going on? And I look up and I see a person handing something to a person. And I think I know what it is, but I'm also a little bit in denial because I'm so excited. Anyway, the next imagery is a vehicle going through the desert and winding through mountain roads. There are kayaks on top, different images, not the same desert/woods. And then the next line comes up and it's, "Since 1934, Fram's driving passion has been focused on protecting your vehicle." So it is confirmed what's going on here. This is Fram, and it is a brand of vehicle oil and air filters. The ad ends with, "So find your passion and we'll make sure you get there." Very heartfelt sentiment. Now, so a couple thoughts are going through my mind. One, I would have never known this brand. Have you heard of it? Do you know? Okay, I would have never known this. When I need an oil filter or air filter changed, I know I need it changed because a nice person at Jiffy Lube tells me, and then they put in whatever they have, and I go on my merry way. And I don't know.
Are they nice, or are they just selling you something?
Yeah. Yes. Hopefully, yes.
They're nicely selling you something.
They're nicely selling me something for sure. They're nice as far as I know in my interactions. But the second thought was, thank goodness there's someone out there passionate about the components of something which is crucial to my livelihood that I have no passion for myself.
But you don't actually think about it until something's wrong with it.
Would never think about it, and even when something was wrong with it, still wouldn't know. So I'm very grateful for those people out there passionate about vehicles. So what's your passion, and how does Fram get you there? Maybe you don't have to worry about the second part. But we are talking about passion and purpose, and on the guidelines that I sent you that I know you ignored and didn't read.
Right. I only got to
cursing as desired, which was the first line, by the way, if you weren't sure. My fault, should have buried that. But anyway, I did want to keep a little bit of checks and balances between what we do in our lives and this podcast to a degree, but I'm throwing that all out the window. So episode 2, most of the guidelines are gone.
Perfect. I don't like guidelines anyway.
So
I didn't read them.
That worked out perfectly. But truly, so talk about your passion and how it connected into a purpose for you and came to be a whole thing.
Okay. Well, since there's no guidelines on this, I think because passion and purpose are often like juxtapositioned with each other. They're kind of married, and I think that can be great as a starting point, but it can be dangerous. I think a lot of times passion for people tends to trump purpose. It's easy to be passionate about something, right? It's like because passion is almost wholly driven by emotion, which I think is a good starting point, but it's also like crime of passion, a lot of times without the purpose side of it, without the intentional side of it, without the why am I doing this side of it, it can kind of be just ideas run amok,
in terms of making it like an entrepreneurial endeavor.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. Because, ideas, like, to certain people come 1,000 miles a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where the passion part of it comes in. You're passionate about a thing. And so you see all these opportunities for ways of, not necessarily capitalizing on the thing, but enhancing the thing, and without some guidance, without some intent, without something or someone to help you kind of hone that into a singular, more focused kind of purpose, it's very easy to accomplish nothing. Because you want to do so much that you end up doing nothing.
People who are passionate about many things,
Yeah.
kind of thing,
Yes.
where they're bouncing from just one thing to the next and never really solidifying into one thing.
Yes.
Right. So I'm going to use a quote from Khalil Gibran, because we're right there. So I'm just going to throw it in,
Mm-hmm.
and it's on reason and passion. Your reason and your passion are the rudder and the sails of your seafaring soul. For reason, ruling alone is a force confining, and passion, unattended, is a flame that burns to its own destruction.
Yes.
And for those who don't know,
that's what I was saying, just not nearly as eloquently.
You're like, that's exactly what I said. That's exactly what I heard.
I mean, again, if you didn't catch it last time, I don't know what we're talking about until we get here to start talking. She asks a lot of questions.
I do.
And Sakuraba, the violence.
The violence. I mean, truthfully.
Yeah. So no, I mean that is essentially what I was trying to say, but yes, that's much more eloquent.
I wasn't trying to overshadow you or anything.
I mean, if I had written it, it would have been more eloquent.
Right. You just hit the nail on the head for exactly what that was. And so in terms of, it's not that you can't be passionate about things, but if you are trying to go down a path with this passion, there has to be a balance to it. And that balance usually is some type of reason or purpose for what you're doing.
Yeah. And again, like, balance is an iffy thing too. It's like, all right, well, people talk about work-life balance, and it's if you're truly passionate about something and you have a greater purpose, it's very difficult to also have balance. Like if you want to be a high achiever in a thing, if you want to take that passion and drive your purpose, it's hard to balance, and we kind of touched on this last time. Success can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, and it's all relative. I think if you want to be successful in anything beyond like what just normal societal standards are, sometimes that balance is tough to find.
Yeah. What is so? I'm gonna tell you a story, and I have a lot of different stories for this podcast. So we're gonna see how far we get with these different stories.
Okay.
But the first one is about the founder of Tom's,
Okay.
and I'm not sure how much or if you're familiar with this story. He had 4 businesses before he started the company Tom's, and it was a happenstance kind of thing where he was in Argentina, met up with some people at a bar who were there doing a shoe drop. They were giving shoes that they had collected to an area that was less fortunate. They didn't have it, and they needed shoes for school.
Sure.
And he was invited to come along, and he went along with them, and it really got his wheels turning. And now he was entrepreneurial in nature, obviously at this point, having started his first business at 19, again out of necessity for those, and ended up going to some shoe makers in the area, designing them a little bit differently, creating something that he knew the US market, specifically where he was in LA, would really take to, and coming up with this idea to give away 1 pair of shoes for every pair sold. And obviously, that turned out okay for him. Tom's is kind of well known a little bit. But it's something that he ended up like just going with for his life, and he hadn't intended it to, and when he was asked if he thought having those other businesses, helped or were part of it, he said it definitely helped. And if he hadn't had those other businesses, it may have been something that he passed on afterwards, but he ended up, really becoming a part of it, making it whole for himself.
Yeah. I we have multiple businesses, and I think there's a lot of overlap, obviously, with what they are and what they do. And I do find myself sometimes, um, thinking, man, if we didn't have this, I could really focus on that. But then also, it's like, but if I didn't have this, I'm not sure that the other one would have even existed.
Right.
It's like one became a conduit for the other, which became a conduit for the third. And I think when you are passionate about a lot of things, especially if they're related in some way, it's easy to let one drive another and drive another. And as long as you can do it in a way where you just don't lose sight of what the original thing was, I think it can be done. Some people will say, well, you would be so much more successful if you would just focus on this thing. And they may be right when it comes to just that thing. They probably are right when it comes to just that thing. But I'm the type of person, me personally, and you know this, like I like to build things. I like to create. I like to design. I like to, and the idea of building something new that drives what we're already doing is super exciting to me.
Yep.
Now I definitely I wane a little bit on the execution sometimes once the thing is built. I know this about myself. It's something that I definitely have made attempts to work on, and that's where I think passion only gets you so far.
Yeah.
That's where it's a great igniter. It's a great fuse, but if it's not fueled continuously with consistency and repetition, and somebody that can understand how to execute and get past, okay, well, I'm super excited about this on the front end. How do we keep that and build on that and make it something sustainable?
Well, that's so important to show people, because a lot of times in terms of having passion at work, people see you going out there doing the thing you're passionate about and having fun, and you're doing what looks like 100% the work you enjoy, but they don't see the actual parts of the job that you do not enjoy. Like, yeah, a lot of what we do as being passionate people who are able to build their life around their passion and connect a purpose to it and make it into financially stable endeavors, how I'm going to put that. They don't see the stuff that we, even though we're passionate about what we do, that we still don't enjoy.
Yeah.
There are still the eat the frog tasks that I knock out in the morning, like, all right, let me get this done with so I can go on and do my other things. And I joke that I'm still working 8 to 5 during the day, and then at night I get to do my fun hobby. It just happens to be the hobby that is also the work I was doing during the day.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's, especially in fields similar to ours, where there's a bit of art to it. They do become passion projects. That's why so many people start something like what we're doing, what we do, but it doesn't continue. They fail,
right?
Because it seems easy, and you can be passionate about teaching martial arts as an example, but to your point, that's the fun and relatively easy part of it. That's the thing that you enjoy doing. It's the social media posts and making sure that this thing's getting paid and the HVAC is being maintained, and like all of the tiny little things that nobody sees, unless something goes wrong, that really make the business work and continue. The other stuff, the stuff that people see, and it's not just us. It's anybody that has some sort of entrepreneurial kind of spirit to them. The stuff that people see is what they're truly passionate about, what they truly love doing. It's the underneath those layers where the work happens that most people, I think, can do without. But you can't. It's literally what makes it happen.
Yeah. So I'm gonna give you a little story, and I've seen variations on this, and it's three bricklayers are asked, "What are you doing?" The first says, "I'm laying bricks." The second says, "I'm building a church," and the third says, "I'm building the house of God." The first bricklayer has a job, the second has a career, the third has a calling. And so the idea around this is that the difference between those things, the job, the career, the calling, isn't necessarily the work; it's how you perceive the work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. I,
Because we still just, I mean, we have a square building that we go in and we do things that, it can all be boiled down to just
sure.
a job if we wanted it to.
Right. And in passing and a bit in tongue in cheek, often, I will refer to what I do, or I will say, well, if I had a real job, or
Yeah.
when I had a real
Yeah.
job, or whatever. And the reality is, we do have real jobs. Like, it may not be what people typically see as a real job. We don't have, or I don't have consistent salary. There's no 401k, and
Mhm.
the things that everybody says you're supposed to have, but it's a real job. And in some ways, it can be all consuming if you allow it to be, because it's like, well, you can take off whenever you want. I'm like, no, that's not how this
You
works at
cannot.
all. Like, you take off work, not you, but the general public, you take off work, you're getting paid for that week vacation or that 2 week vacation or whatever. When you own your own business, that's not usually the case. And I'm not complaining. Listen, I tell people all the time, I am the worst employee. I am not a good employee. No matter how long I go without paying myself for whatever reason, because the economy there turns down or whatever happens, I don't lament it. I don't regret it a bit. Like, this is who I am. This is what I do. I'm not looking for a job. You don't want me.
You did a normal job for a while, though, especially through college, working at pet stores. And I mean, I could see that being your passion. You could easily be, do you think, in a different.
I mean, my freshman year in college, I had 3 jobs. I'm talking about at the same time. While going to school, I worked at a veterinary clinic, I worked at a pet store, and I worked at this place called Ferncroft Farms, where I basically handled all of the USDA maintenance for this exotic animal ranch. So USDA compliance and things like that. Which, that sort of thing, I hate, can't stand it. Right?
Not passionate on that one.
No.
Okay.
But the farm, the ranch itself, I loved that work. I loved being outside and I mean, imagine you get to go to work and you get to play with caracal kittens, like, or you're gonna, all right, I gotta go feed the camels, like, that's awesome. I love that. But then it's like, okay, well, now I gotta make sure that when this USDA inspector shows up, that this is all in order. And I'm like, I hate this, So again, I mean, it's the same idea. It's just I didn't own it.
Mm-hmm.
There were parts of the job that I loved, parts of the job that I could not stand. So I think everybody experiences that to some level. You don't have to just be a business owner,
Right.
But when you're a business owner, you're kind of responsible for all of it. You don't get to just. I mean, obviously, there's a division of labor and things like that, but you don't get to just acquiesce this part of things to somebody, because at the end of the day, the way it should be, in my opinion, at the end of the day, you're responsible for all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Something goes wrong, well, you can't say, well, that's not my job.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if you do point the finger down, it comes right back up at you, as the owner. It's just interesting that, it's clearly you're passionate about animals and beings and things like that, but it never connected to a purpose for you.
Yeah.
Do you think it could have?
Maybe. I mean, I was going to, my whole life I wanted to be a veterinarian. I was going to school for that. I was an animal science major. What I saw and what I experienced in working all these jobs, because I worked at horse stables and, like I said, exotic animal farms and vet clinics, and what I saw was people that I think probably at one point were passionate about these things the actual job had taken all of that away from them.
Yeah, I can see that.
I remember I worked at an exotic animal clinic, and I remember hearing the vets talk and some of the vet techs and things, and it was like, I'm not even sure they liked animals anymore. You know, they definitely didn't like people because of the interactions that they were having with people. But I'm not even sure that they like animals anymore. You know, so that kind of turned me off to the whole thing, and I was like, you know what, this is just not for me. Plus, I sucked at school. I was just not. Not that I sucked at school. I didn't like it.
Yeah,
it just was not for me.
No, the structure was definitely not for you. That could be its own podcast too. I think it's interesting because for most of my college career, I was pretty heavily engrossed in music. I mean, that's not what I was majoring in. I was majoring in business, and I was getting the degree I thought that was going to help for my future, and that I was interested in it, but I also just mostly understood it and happened to be good at it. And I'm like, okay, this must be a thing. Here we go. And, that did something for me. But I've spent all of my free time in the music building and in different bands and that sort of thing. And I think there's a part of me that could have maybe stayed in that environment and found a purpose and developed through that. But I ended up joining back into training when I got out of college. And that was just going to be the hobby and the thing I did at night. And that's the thing that caught, that's the thing that snowballed.
Well, see, and for me, I didn't start this until after I left college. Mm-hmm. Like martial arts it was something I always wanted to do, growing up, when I grew up, I mean, Kung Fu theater was a thing, and all of these 80s action heroes, like it was something that I always wanted to do, but I just never really had the opportunity to do. And so I didn't really get into it until I was an adult, and I had the opportunity to just full steam ahead on my own.
Yeah.
Which, I think is, people find passion and purpose throughout life. And I think that can change throughout life too. I mean, you look at somebody like Dave Thomas, who founded Wendy's in his 60s or 70s, or Colonel Sanders, same thing. I think he was 60s or 70s when he founded KFC. I think you can. I don't think there's a limit on that, right, unless you put it on yourself.
I want to go to the other end of that spectrum, actually, and talk about an origin story from a younger person, about 16. And this is the origin of Zumba. Do you know how Zumba started?
No.
Okay, I texted a couple friends who weren't into Zumba, but enjoyed fitness and dancing and different things, and I knew of it, and they didn't know either. So I'm excited to tell you about this because it was a Colombian by the name of Alberto Perez, or Beto as he goes by, because this ended up being 3 Albertos. So he's Beto. I'm not going to get into all the Albertos. You can go check that out for yourself. But Beto was a dancer, and they couldn't afford dancing lessons for him, but he was very passionate about dancing. And he won a lambada contest in Colombia and was accepted to one of the best academies in this area. And so to put himself through this, he was teaching step aerobics. So one day, this is just what I'm just incredibly impressed. He left
How did he win a lambada contest if he couldn't afford dance lessons?
I don't have all the details.
Okay, fair enough.
But I have a podcast if you want to listen to it and try to get it.
Sorry, go ahead.
And Wikipedia wasn't super helpful about the origin and the steps of this. But so he was putting himself through this school and teaching step aerobics. And this is back in the days of cassette tapes. And he left his regular music at home for the step aerobics class. And the only thing he had with him was more of like a Latin merengue salsa kind of mix. And so he realizes this, and, he gets into class, and he didn't say, oh, I made a mistake or anything like that. He came in and said, I want to do something different. And so he taught him some choreography and some steps to the music, and discovered that he loved it. And obviously there are some steps in between here, but he ended up selling all his stuff, buying a ticket to Miami, going to gyms, didn't speak English, and finally got a chance to audition, and he was supposed to do a 15-minute audition for this person, and it was just him and her. And it was a 15-minute audition with just two people. By the end, it had gone about an hour, and there were 25 people in that room. People just kept walking by, and they were interested in it, and they loved it. And he spent a long time living on the edge, literally just selling everything he has, throwing everything he can into it and it's crazy because it's and this happens a ton, but it's something that just didn't exist.
Yeah.
And he accidentally made an opportunity for himself and wasn't afraid to step up and give it a shot.
Yeah. And that's, we kind of touched on this a little bit last time. That's betting on yourself. That's being willing to gamble on you. And there's a saying, which I don't totally agree with, but in some cases it makes a lot of sense, when ignorance is mutual, confidence is king. And so
say that again.
When ignorance is mutual, confidence is king. So, and I don't know.
I love it, and
it
it
came
hurts.
from.
No, I know.
But the idea that he didn't have his regular music, he's going to walk into this class. The way that he presented it was going to dictate how it went.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
If he had gone in and said, this goes back to, again, last week with expectations. If he had gone in and said, I forgot my music, I found this, we're going to give it a shot.
We're going to do the same thing we've been doing. It's just different music. Go with it. Yeah.
I don't think it would have gone off the way that it went off with him coming in, acting excited about it. Mm-hmm. And maybe he wasn't acting, maybe he really was, but regardless, mm-hmm. When ignorance is mutual, confidence is king. If he came in and said, we're gonna try something new today, this is gonna be awesome, I'm really looking forward to showing you this to you guys, I'm feeling good about it, I'm excited about it, whatever, the presentation of it probably dictated the way that it was gonna go. He needed to actually feel it on some level, but
you can still set the tone from the front. Yeah, which is, when we talk about our passion, coaching and developing coaches is what we do.
Yep. It's and it's not enough to just be passionate about it. Like, you have to understand, and you have to have a deep rooted kind of knowledge base to draw from. But at the end of the day, if you don't love it, if it's not something that excites you, that will be pervasive throughout your class, and people won't continue to come to your class. They'll be able to read that you're putting on an act, especially maybe not the first time, because maybe they don't know you.
Right.
But eventually, that veneer will wear very, very thin.
Fake it till you make it doesn't always.
Nah, I think it can have a short term, like a very short shelf life. Mm-hmm. But most people will quickly see through it. Unless you're some sort of, sociopath that can just...
They're out there.
Oh yeah, for sure. We just watched... we just watched the thing about Blagojevich, yep. he and I don't know his psychopathy or anything. But on a lot of levels, I think he believed the things that he was saying, and he was able to make other people believe it. Yeah. Yeah.
So, this makes me think of a story, and as far as I know, this is just a story, but if it's an actual thing, let me know. And it's, so a shoe factory sends 2 marketing scouts out to a remote region, study the prospects for expanding its business. And one reports back, it's not a good market, no one wears shoes. The other one writes back, glorious business opportunity. They have no shoes. That perception, that the thought process, again, I chose this topic because it would tie so closely to our last episode, but that lateral thinking ability is an incredible, for making your passion and purpose align, you have to have a way to bridge those two things. And so that second scout who could make that connection, to me, it has a better ability to do that.
Yeah. And then, once you get past that again, I think passion is it's the igniter, it's the pilot light. It's the thing that gets you going. Um, you got to get beyond that. I mean, maybe in this instance, you've got one guy that sees opportunity here, and he might be totally right, and he's excited about it, but it's going to take.
Yeah.
I need to go actually figure out why they don't have shoes.
Well, and so it's funny you should say why, because one of my favorite connections on this is the book from Simon Sinek, Start With Why.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just his book, but I mean his TED Talks. Like they all talk about not mostly. A lot of what I have seen is from the golden circle, which is 3 concentric circles, and in the middle is why, the next ring out is how, and then the furthest ring out is what. And most companies and ads and things focus on the what and the how, and they don't connect it with a why. And of course, we could look at a ton of companies and that sort of thing, but starting with your why, whether it's your own passionate why and being able to help people buy why you do something rather than what you do, or really understanding your consumer, your market, and what their why is. Because if you miss that step, it doesn't matter how passionate or purposeful you are.
Well, it's interesting. I said earlier I don't really pay attention to ads much, but one did catch my eye recently that, and since then I've seen it a couple of times, and it's Nike, and the message is literally winning isn't for everyone. That's a Nike ad? That's the tagline.
Oh.
Winning isn't for everyone. And I thought, you know what? Some people that's going to hit very wrong,
mm-hmm.
but they're not Nike people.
Mm-hmm.
They're not people that are passionate about a thing and want to do better in that thing. Those people are like, man, that excites me. Because I am a winner.
Yeah.
I do want to do better. I do want to improve. And so that ad, I think that ad kind of touches a bit on the why. What is your why? Because for some people, the why is, I want to win. I want to do better. I want to improve. I want to be the best, whatever. And if you can tap into that as a shoe manufacturer,
mm-hmm.
Because in an industry like that, we're talking about how do you stand out?
Right.
How do you separate? What's the difference between a Nike shoe and a Reebok and a whatever,
Right.
They're probably made in the same plant or one plant over or whatever, and the messaging and finding out what somebody else's passion is and then tying that to a purpose and then saying, we have the shoe for you.
Yeah.
Because you're a winner.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not a winner, then okay, we're not for you. So that ad, like I had an immediate visceral response to it. Like, I like this. And then the very next thought I had was, there's going to be a lot of people that don't like this.
Uh-huh.
But then my next thought was, but they're not talking to them.
They're not talking to them. So I was just searching for a way to make this happen, and you just put it right there for me. Because some people, they will go to the ends of the earth to win, and some people try it once or twice and they're out. Yeah, hey, listen. Okay, so this is a friend's quote, and go ahead and say it along with me once you start to know it. And this is from Pete Decker, who was Monica's boyfriend.
This is about Moss 860.
Sure it is. And so, Pete wanted to dominate the physical world, and his first fight did not go very well. And at the end, Monica's like, all right, that was great. You tried hard. So proud of you. Let's move on from this. And enter Pete. Let me tell you a story. When I set out to create Moss 865, do you think it just happened overnight? No. There was Moss 1 that burnt down my dad's garage. There was Moss 2 that would only schedule appointments in January, and 862 others that I learned from it, just like I learned from this fight, never to let a guy stand on my neck.
Okay. So a few things here. One,
We're obsessed with Friends.
That scene is
so good.
Amazing. It's awesome. It's so funny. But this is also a good example of sometimes passion just isn't enough. Just because you've been successful in one area, one arena, does not mean that that's going to translate to another one. And the lessons that you learn from that does not
Right.
necessarily mean that they'll translate to over here. A lot of times they will.
Right,
If
right,
we're talking about just a purely entrepreneurial standpoint,
Mhm.
we're way outside of that here. Like this is essentially Bill Gates deciding that he wants to fight, Anderson
Thank
Silva
God.
or whatever. So I think there's a few kind of lessons with that. Passion is not enough. And two, I think here, and it sounds goofy that I'm even making this a thing, but I don't think he actually had a purpose there other than winning.
He just
wanted to be the UFC champ.
Yeah.
Like
he had conquered this one part of his life,
right.
And he's like, well, what next? And
right, and he
picked, made this jump.
He literally picked the biggest, most disparate thing that he could think of, and I don't think he actually had a purpose. I almost think, and this happens, I think, with a lot of high functioning people in certain parts of their lives, they get bored.
Yeah.
And need to stoke another fire. And sometimes it because you were so successful over here, you think, well, if I could do that, why can't I do this?
Right.
When
in reality, if he had gone and taken some classes and did it as a hobby, he could be passionate about it. It's just, you don't have to go be the best at it.
Right.
It reminds me of a story attributed to Kurt Vonnegut.
Okay.
He was 15 and was working on an archaeological dig at the time. And one of the archaeologists was talking to him, getting to know him, as all 15-year-olds do. And I have never been able to validate this. I'm not 100% sure if it really happened, but it has been shared enough to where it happened now. And they were asking, what kind of sports do you like? What's your favorite subject? That sort of thing. And he told the archaeologist he didn't play sports. He was in theater, choir, played violin, piano, took art classes, those kinds of things. And the archaeologist was impressed and, wow, that's amazing. And Vonnegut said, oh no, I'm not good at any of them. And, the archaeologist is like, well, I don't think being good at things has to be the point of doing them. You've got these experiences and different skills, and all of these are making you an interesting person no matter how well you do that. And so I've heard this part, but I don't hear this next part a lot, which is where Vonnegut's response to that was, I went from a failure, someone who hadn't been talented enough at anything to excel, to someone who did things because he enjoyed them. Said, I had been raised in such an achievement-oriented environment, so inundated with the myth of talent, that I thought it was only worth doing things if you could win at them.
Yeah, I get that, and I in certain parts of my life I've been there and felt that. When I did track and field, at the time you could do as many as 4 events per meet, and I was, we'll say, good in a lot of different things, but I wasn't great in any of them. And from one meet to the next, I might have a completely 4 different events. I might be doing triple jump, long jump, high jump, 110 meter hurdles, and then the next time might be pole vault, triple jump, 4x400 relay, and a 200 meter race.
Yeah, that checks. Those are all track things. Very good at sports. Know all
Yes.
of those.
And so I was good enough to get us points in all those things, but I wasn't good enough to where, I'm going to consistently place in pole vault or whatever. But I enjoyed it.
Right.
I loved every one of those events. And now I don't think if I didn't love them, I probably wouldn't have even been good at them.
Right.
Yeah. But I was never going to be great in any of those.
Yeah. So I experienced the same thing. I play different instruments. I have hobbies. I enjoy rock climbing, and we do a bunch of different sporty elements of violence. And I enjoy these things. And again, I'm not great at any of them. I'm not going to be a standout, probably. Don't know yet, anyway. But what my passion usually brings me to is more of the teaching side of things. And so by being interested in these different things, I've been able to teach them in some capacity, whether it's, your daughter and helping her make a noise on one of the instruments I play, or helping somebody near me in the climbing gym. And I'm very upfront with people. Like, I'm not amazing at these, but I've picked up some things along the way because I'm really attentive to the process and the details that I can help you up. I can give you a step up. And so that's where those kinds of things overlap and connect to me.
Yeah.
All right, so we got to wrap this up. I'm going to finish off with one more quote, usually attributed in some way with Stephen Covey, I think. And it's, some people say they have 20 years experience when in reality they have 1 year's experience repeated 20 times. And I think those people who are living in that 1 year repeated over 20 times, they probably have not found their passion. They're not excelling in their purpose. And so if you really want to step out of that, you've got maybe a little bit of digging to do.
And I don't be afraid to start over.
Mm-hmm.
As humans, we get connected to this thing and this idea that, well, I put so much time into this. So what? That experience has gotten you to this point. And this point may be that this is not my passion. This is not my purpose. So I'm going to take this experience. It's not a waste. It's what got me to here. And now I'm going to let this drive me to figure out what my passion is, what my purpose is. Because to me, and obviously it's all relative, life is relatively short.
Yeah.
And living it in a way that you are not enjoying it, you're not having fun, you don't feel like you're fulfilling who you are or who you want to be, or you're not making the world a better place. If you want to. If you don't want to, then whatever. Then that's fine. But if that's the case, go find that thing. And if it takes you 10 times of trying different things until you get there, so what?
It's kind of similar to what we say, listen to your intuition. That's there for a reason.
Yeah. Pain is in discomfort. And if you're or no, what did I just say?
What? Pain is in discomfort?
I mean, that's true.
Yes.
Growth is in discomfort. And, you're going to have to get a little bit uncomfortable to get better and to improve. And uncomfortable may mean quitting that job. May mean getting a new major. It may mean leaving school, whatever. And sometimes you're going to have with those decisions, you're going to have a lot of people around you telling you, well, don't do that, what about this. And, at the end of the day, they can't live your life for you.
Yeah.
They're not paying your bills, unless they are.
Well, yeah.
And then maybe you have to listen. Okay, I know we're against the clock here. No. Anyway.
Go do you.
Yes.
All right. If you enjoyed this episode, share it, subscribe, get alerts, view it a few hundred more times for us. I'm kidding. I have no idea if it works that way. If you didn't enjoy this episode, go away, be quiet, stay off social media, don't say a word. And we will be back next time on Wife of Violence. Thanks, everyone.